Time for our deep dive into the Boston Red Sox. Do you have reinforcements coming from the farm system for 2024? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. So, as we like to do is a deep dive here. This was a fan request, wanted to have a show on the Boston Red Sox. That's what we're going to do. Obviously, we can't be comprehensive with everybody in the system, but looking from the perspective of what kind of help can you reasonably expect in 2024 and 2025 from the farm system and some of the top prospects. And I think the biggest place to start is answering some questions and maybe resolving some of the concern behind shortstop Marcelo Mayer. His stat line this year, divided between High A Greenville and Double A Portland, is not very good. And he ended the season ended in August with a shoulder injury. And there's a lot of context that we need here. So the overall numbers, 78 games between Greenville and Portland. It was 35 in Greenville, 43 in Portland. 236, 306, 433. 13 home runs, 34 extra base hits, 32 walks to 86 strikeouts, and 9 of 14 on stolen bases. Not a very good slash line. And when you see what he did in Double A Portland, he batted 189. And a lot of people were rightfully concerned about what's going on. And he had a shoulder injury. And he went on his season ended in early August, but he got hurt in May. He got hurt on May 7th in High A. He needed a triple for the cycle, was trying to stretch a double into a triple, tripped at second base and fell, and the next day had pain in his shoulder, took a week off, came back, was not the same. They finally shut him down. And let me give you the context for he was not the same. The beginning of the season through May 7th for Marcelo Mayer, 337, 414, 582, 21% strikeout rate. From May 14th, when he came back, until he got shut down in early August, he batted 190, 256, 366. He talked about he didn't have the strength in the shoulder, and the quote that I heard was literally, he said, "My swing was just giving out every single time." So Marcelo Mayer, when he was healthy, was hitting very well, was getting on base, hitting for power, was keeping the strikeouts down, and was playing a pretty decent shortstop. Played a little bit of third base in Portland, but was playing a pretty good shortstop. I want to say he had a 978 fielding percentage in Double A Portland, despite having the injuries. I feel like the ETA here, what you're probably looking at, is he's going back to Portland in 2024. He should be fully healthy for the start of the season. He's going to Double A Portland in 2024, and the goal should probably be to give him a taste of the bigs in September of 2024. Now, some of this is going to matter, obviously, if you are in contention or not. That is going to be a big deal. It's hard to give him the runway to try it at the major league level if he's not successful and or you're in a tight pennant race or whatever it might be. But I think the goal here should be Double A Portland to Triple A to the majors by September. And so what that means from a position player standpoint, is you went out in August and traded for Luis Urias from the Brewers. You'll have more years of team control of him. I honestly think he's probably better positioned as your backup infielder to cover the middle infield versus your starting second baseman. And could Nick Yorke make it up by the midpoint of the season? He spent the entire year playing second base in AA Portland, 110 games, batted .268, .350, .435 with 13 home runs. If you start him off in AAA, if everything clicks, Nick Yorke could be your second baseman by the midpoint of the season. And again, assuming everybody's healthy, you've got Story at short, you've got Nick Yorke at second, Luis Urias is your primary backup, and then you don't have to worry about rushing Marcelo Mayer. And then when Marcelo Mayer is finally ready, you can have a conversation about him playing short or third or second, wherever it may be. Obviously, you're not going to move a guy like a Raffy Devers. You're not going to move him off of third base. And so it could be, does Story kick into second? Do you put Mayer at second base to ease his transition? What do you do? How do you figure it out? Depends on how everybody's playing and all of that. But that's how I see that going. And when you get to 25, ideally, your middle infield can be some combination of Story, Mayer, and Yorke with Urias as a bench piece, because you're also going to have that same kind of crunch with the outfielders over the next couple of years. You're probably safe in 24. You don't have to really worry about it in 24. Adam Duvall is going to be a free agent, but you'll have Duran, you'll have Ceddanne Rafaela if he decide to keep him up. Verdugo, I believe, is on his final year of team control, or maybe he's got 2 left. And then left field, is it Willie Abreu? Is it does Bobby Dahlbeck play a little bit of left field? Is it Matsutaka Yoshida? What do you do there? And going to be something you have to figure out. Yoshida hasn't shown that he's very good defensively. I want to say his fielding run value was like bottom 5% on StatCast. So you've got questions about, okay, Roman Anthony and Miguel Bleis are not going to be ready next season. But they both project to eventually be in the bigs and be good. Roman Anthony finished the year in AA, but it was 10 games. So 106 games between Salem, Greenville, and Portland. Single A, high A, double A. For Roman Anthony, in those games, 272, 403, 466, 14 home runs, 45 extra base hits. This is his age 19 season, so the power hasn't fully come in. When you see the swing, you can see the potential is there. And he did pick up the power production in Greenville versus Salem, but he's obviously, he still has physical projection left to do. He had 86 walks to 119 strikeouts, again in 106 games, and 16 of 23 on stolen bases. I do think he's my top outfielder in this system, right? I've got Roman Anthony above Miguel Bleis. The power, I think, is very good. The big question here, obviously, is going to be how does as he finishes that physical development, what happens to his speed? He can play center field. He's probably, to me, going to end up being a right fielder, which means Miguel Bleis, who is farther away and probably has the highest ceiling of anybody, but obviously a lot more risk because he's farther away. He just finished 30 games in single A this year, batting .230, .282, .325. So a lot of really high ceiling, a lot of tools, pretty far away. Roman Anthony could conceivably be a end of next season taste if everything goes well in his age 20 season in 2024. And then Ceddanne Rafaela should probably be part of your outfield mix. We had this conversation a couple weeks ago where I talked about, I don't think I got Ceddanne Rafaela wrong. He still chases a lot, and he's going to have to make a significant adjustment at the major league level to be successful. Kind of reminder, in the minors between AA and AAA, he batted .302, .349, .520 with 20 home runs, 54 extra base hits, and stole 36 bags. But he also struck out 103 times and had one of the lowest chase rate, or one of the worst chase rates. And so when he got to the majors in 28 games, so just about a month in the majors for Ceddanne Rafaela. Batted .241, .281, .386, struck out 28 times, had 2 home runs, 8 total extra base hits, and was 3 of 4 on stolen bases. It was 90 at-bats, okay? He still has prospect eligibility, still has rookie status. He definitely needs to do some more work, and he, to me, feels like a guy who's going to be playing for a major league job in spring training, and depending on what he shows them, he absolutely may start the year back in AAA Worcester, simply because he has so much work to do to hit the ceiling and to stick at the major league level. And like I mentioned, until injuries happen, you don't absolutely have to have him at the major league level. In just a minute, I want to talk about some of these pitchers because there's not a ton of either major league immediacy or super high ceilings on some of these guys. We'll talk about them next right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Boston sports fans watching this show, I apologize because I know that Mac Jones is not very good, and so the Patriots are a little bit of a struggle right now. But right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team that you bet on wins. The good thing is you don't have to bet on your local team. You can hate bet against them if you want to. All that matters is the team that you bet on, the $5 moneyline bet, that team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action. Incredibly easy app to use. There's a ton of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, all kind of stuff like that. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Okay, so looking at these pitchers in this system, there's not a ton of guys that I'm like saying they're super close to the bigs and they look like they could be impact players when they get there. The one to me that's probably the closest is Shane Drohan, 2020 fifth rounder out of Florida State, spent most of the year in AAA last year. So started off in Portland, and very quickly showed he was too good to be in Portland. It's his age 24 season. 5-0 with a 1.32 ERA in 6 AA starts. 34 innings, 36 strikeouts, gave up 1 total home run. So they moved him to AAA. And in AAA, 5-7 with a 6.47 ERA in 21 appearances, 19 starts. It was 89 total innings, so it gives him like 123 or so for the year. 93 strikeouts, so 9.4 per 9. But the walks are what got him. 63 walks, so 6.4 walks per 9 innings. And the concerns that I have about Shane Drohan is he's really tinkered with his arsenal. And so I think some of the walks come from that, but I'm a little concerned because he hasn't really found those standout things, right? So he added a cutter earlier this year when he was in AA. And so it was like, to start the year, he was like 4-seam, changeup, curveball, cutter, right? And then he gets to AAA, and I don't know if this is a StatCast issue or if he changed the usage, but it reads that he only threw 33 of those cutters, but he threw 372 sliders. And so he went from 4-seam, cutter, curveball, change to sinker, slider, changeup, 4-seam. He threw the curveball 5% of the time. He threw the cutter again. He threw 33 of them in AAA. It was mostly sinker, slider. And then the concern here is nothing but the curveball broke a 30% CSW, right? The sinker's sitting around 92 miles an hour. He's got that slider in the mid-80s. The cutter is sitting around 87 or so, so I think it may have just been when he'd torque up the slider a little bit, it would read as a cutter. So it may just be a cutter of his that he's throwing at 85. But the changeup reads in the low 80s, the curveball's in the mid to high 70s. And again, 5% of the time, it's very much a break it out to steal a strike early in a count thing. But none of the pitches really seemed to do that. He struggled to throw strikes. It was about a 45% strike percentage. Just really struggled to get balls over the plate. And that in the walk numbers. And then when he did give up contact, he gave up a lot of hard hit contact. It wasn't always like home runs and things like that. The home run rate got up there. What was it? It was 1.5 home runs per 9 innings. Collectively, it was 1.9 in AAA. So he got rocked in AAA. But I worry that the ceiling for Shane Drohan isn't going to be that great because the stuff ultimately isn't that great. So you're looking at a number 4 or a number 5, and luckily, this is a pretty decent when they're healthy. Chris Sale, Nick Pivetta in his final year of control, assuming he doesn't get traded. I've heard some rumors with Atlanta going out and getting second baseman Vaughn Grissom for Nick Pivetta. Brayan Bello, Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck. It's not a bad rotation. You've got Sale as a veteran, Pivetta at 30, and then a bunch of youngsters. And I think Bello's better than number 3. So I love Brayan Bello. But it just doesn't feel like a lot of these guys are close. Winkelman Gonzalez, for instance. Okay, he got 10 starts in AA this year. So he's still, you're probably looking at most of next season before he could make it to the bigs, unless it was an emergency and you pushed him. Now, it was pretty successful. He actually did better in Portland than he did in Greenville. It was a 3.96 ERA for Winkelman Gonzalez on the entire year in his 25 starts. But the 10 starts in Portland, he rocked a 2.42 ERA and 48 1/3 innings. Strikeout rate wasn't as ridiculous as it was in Greenville, but still a healthy 11.7 strikeouts per 9 innings. He had 63 strikeouts in the 48 1/3 innings. The thing for Winkelman Gonzalez, and a little bit of the concern, is even with some improvement in Portland, he still on the year walked 5.7 batters per 9 innings. He had 70 walks in his 111 innings. And so the concern for Winkelman Gonzalez is he's super athletic, and if the changes he showed at the end of the year stick, which is a big if, you've got a mid-rotation guy. And some of the reports are that he was challenged by team officials, that he needed to do better with conditioning, he needed to do better with strength and things like that. And it came after he got blown up in his final start in High A. The Rome Braves tagged him for 7 runs on 8 hits in 5 innings. And despite 8 strikeouts, they lost the game. And that's something where, and he took the loss. And so from that point on, he only had 1 outing in AA where he allowed more than 2 earned runs. And he only had 2 outings that were less than 5 innings, right? He had a bad start against Binghamton, which is the Mets, where he went 2 2/3 innings with 4 runs. And then he had a start late in the year where they were watching his pitch count, and he went 3 innings scoreless against Reading, the Fightin' Phils. And again, it was a pitch count thing. He got up somewhere until 70 pitches after 3 innings, and they went ahead and pulled him. But if those changes, those challenges that they gave to him stick, then Winkelman Gonzalez is a guy that could be a solid mid-rotation piece for you. Because again, Nick Pivetta, final year team control. Don't know if he'll get extended or not. And so you could see an opening in 2025 for Gonzalez to take a rotation spot. Again, the question's going to be which version of Winkelman Gonzalez is the true version. The second half guy we saw in AA, where he responded to the challenge from the team, or the version that we saw earlier in the year with the poor conditioning and lack of strength. And then even if he is the newer version, he still, in those games, he still walked 28 guys in 48 1/3 innings. And yeah, the strikeouts were there, but so were the walks. And that's going to naturally limit his ceilings. Curious to see what he does there. Other guys who are even lower than him, Luis Perales, got 8 starts in High A. He's probably going back to Greenville next year, so he's probably at least 2 years away. There's not a lot of immediate high quality starting pitching coming for this major league roster. It is a very position player heavy farm system, especially at the top. And in just a minute, we're going to get into some specific requests. Members of our Discord gave me names that they wanted to hear about, including Bleis Jordan and David Hamilton. We'll talk about those guys next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. Final segment of the Wednesday edition of Locked On MLB Prospects. We've been talking about the Boston Red Sox and what kind of help they can expect in 24 out of this farm system for the major league roster. Because the goal of a farm system is to help you build a major league team that can contend for championships, right? Segment 3, we're taking some suggestions, some requests from listeners of the show. Most of these came via our Discord, links in the episode description, links in the show notes. You can also, there's a mailbag channel in there if you want to leave questions for Monday's mailbag, things like that. So I had a question about Bleis Jordan and his future on this team, and this is tough. So third rounder in 2020 was seen as probably having some of the best power in that prep class in the 2020 draft. And really, I'm really struggling to see his future fit on this team. So he started off in High A Greenville, then went to Double A Portland. And in Greenville, even split between first base and third base, 35 games at each. When he got to Portland, he spent 30 games at first base and 16 at third. His fielding percentage at both stops at third base never got above .936. He put up 7 errors in 440 innings at third base. And so while at first base, he was almost perfect, 3 errors in 50 innings. And so defensively, you combine that with the fact that you have Rafi Devers signed long-term now at third base, and it feels like he's going to be a first base option. But first base is Triston Casas. And I have this feeling from watching the end of the year of Triston Casas that Triston Casas could challenge for 30, 35 home runs next year. He could have a 35 home run year rather easily. And if everything broke right, he could break 40 home runs next year. That's just the feeling that I have, having watched the end of his year up there, as I was trying to make sure I had an idea of what he looked like when he, towards the end of the year, because I wanted to do the grades for all of the guys who debuted, which that show's coming, I think, next week. And so you enter this weird scenario of Matsutaka Yoshida is probably better as a DH versus a left fielder, despite not really having great power. And then Triston Casas is, your first baseman. And where is the playing time for Bleis Jordan? It feels like you're probably going to slow play him into the bigs. He got 49 games in Double A Portland. He probably goes back to Double A Portland next year because he batted .254, .296, .402. Didn't strike out a ton, 28 strikeouts in 49 games. Very impressed with that because that's been an issue for him in the past. Even at the lower levels, he's like Greenville last year, at the end of the season, he struck out 27 times in 25 games. So to strike out less than once a game and just about once every other game in Double A Portland is definitely improvement. He also only walked 12 times in 49 games, and he's usually run better on base percentages than that. The .296 was the lowest, at least half season on base percentage of his minor league career. So you've got some time to slow play it while you figure out what to do at the major league level. Maybe you figure out a way to get Yoshida back into the field. I don't know. Obviously, injuries will impact a lot of this. He could also be a trade candidate. Not 100% sure there. Had a question about David Hamilton and got a little bit of major league time. So 2019 8th rounder by the Brewers and was moved from the Brewers to the Red Sox in the Hunter Renfroe trade. And so spent the entire year until that call up in AAA. 103 games for David Hamilton. 247, 363, 438. 17 home runs, 37 extra base hits, 71 walks to 109 strikeouts, again in the 103 games. Doesn't really blow you away with any of that, except 57 of 71 on stolen bases. He gets to the majors, 15 game sample. It's like 39 plate appearances. he struggles. 121, 256, 182 slugging. He has 2 extra base hits and only 4 hits total. He is 2 for 3 on stolen bases, and he walks 6 times to 10 strikeouts, which you like 6 walks from a rookie debuting, but obviously makes you wonder, okay. And he played a lot of shortstop down the stretch too. This is a team that was really hurting for shortstop production, and so he got 89, 90 innings at shortstop. Small sample, didn't look amazing. Probably not your go-to shortstop, probably better as a second baseman. But here's the thing. It was a really good 2023 for David Hamilton. He came into that year. Reminder, he was drafted, 2020. He came into this year with 20 home runs in the minor leagues. He added 17 more in AAA this year, which is the best power production that he has shown. And then obviously the stolen bases he stole 70 in Portland in 22, and then he stole 57 in AAA in 23. And so I feel like you're probably not going to... There's probably not a lot of extra room for helium in there. He's probably risen up the rankings as much as he reasonably could. I've got him somewhere around 20th or so in the system. And I think the big change has been we saw him add exit velocity. He added, his average exit velo this year went up 5 miles an hour. His 90th percentile exit velo went up 4 miles an hour. So he's one of those rare guys that was able to significantly add strength and add power production in his mid-20s. He's 26 years old. He turned 26 the end of September. So at age 25, he added significant strength to his frame, and it just feels like that's typically not something that happens. You usually see that from that age 21 to 23 kind of range. So the fact that he's added that strength, I think now gives him a floor of a major league regular, maybe a second division regular. He may end up being your utility guy in the middle infield, because if you look at the bench next year, you're looking at, I'm going to assume that Bobby Dahlbeck is probably your backup corner outfielder. Your second catcher is you get Connor Wong and Reese McGuire, and neither one of them is that great, but one of them will be on the bench. Rob Refsnyder is a backup outfielder. I don't think he's anything more than a backup outfielder, so he's probably on there. And then you've got a middle infield spot that is open, and ideally, Luis Urias is that guy. But again, I don't think he's ready, or I don't think he moves down until Marcelo Mayer comes up. And so maybe David Hamilton becomes that guy, and he can step in if there's some sort of injury, or he battles Luis Urias in spring training for that second base job to be the starter at second base and go ahead and make Urias the middle infield backup. I don't think you're going to see a ton of impact minor leaguers debuting on this roster early in the year next year. It feels like a lot of it is going to be improvements from guys already on the roster, more consistency from Tristan Casas, Ceddanne Rafaela having a better season, and then towards the end of the year, if everything goes right, seeing some of these guys like a Marcelo Mayer, guys like that, able to come up and give some impact, and you'll see the infield first. The outfield will lag at least another year behind because of the younger age of Roman Anthony and Miguel Bleis and all those guys. Fantastic week this week. We've got a positional top 10 coming up tomorrow, as well as a mock draft for the 2024 MLB draft, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you got questions for us, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us. We have a Discord. All that stuff, and it's in a link tree that's down in the episode description and down in the show notes. Until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.